For the longest time, I couldn't figure out why my solar setup wasn't lasting as long as I thought it should. I mean, I had 400 amp hours of batteries, but they were dying way sooner than they should have. And it wasn't until I ran across the battery manufacturer's website in the small print that I finally figured out that I was doing it all wrong. Well, good afternoon, Nick from We Can Explore It here, and I got another video that I want to share with you, but before I do, I want to tell you a little bit about it and tell you a little how I came up with this idea. This is another how we do it video, and I've been thinking about this one for a long time. I wanted to share with you our solar setup. And as I was thinking about it, I thought it would probably be a good idea to share with you our generator setup at the same time, because to me, solar is a means to an end. So the end for me was to be able to be out boondocking anywhere that we wanted to, and to be able to have the energy for all the stuff that we needed inside the camper, like to run all the appliances and things. But then as I was thinking, I knew that I wanted to be able to run that air conditioner as well. To just be honest, I want to be able to be comfortable. That's why I carry that generator with us. So that's why I decided to put it into this video. So we're going to tell you about our solar and about our generator. There's a couple things about this video that are going to be a little bit different than any of the other YouTube videos out there. Number one, this is not going to be so much of an how to install it type of video. I know there's thousands of those on the internet, and a lot of those guys took a lot of painstaking steps to show you how to install it, and usually they do that when they're actually installing it, and so I think that's the best way to do it. But there is going to be something that I've learned while installing it, and I've actually installed it wrong the first time, and then it wasn't working the way I would like it to. And so then I went and did a bunch of research and found out some very important things that you have to do when installing your solar. So I put that in here, and that's going to be later on in the video, but that's part two of what's a little bit different about this video, is that I'm going to go a little technical with you and explain why the first time that I installed my solar it was wrong, and then what I did to make it right. So if you're thinking about solar, or if you have solar and it's just not working the way that you think it should, this video is for you. I'm going to take you through what we've purchased, and I'm going to show you how we hooked it up, and I'm going to show you that very important information, and I'm going to tell you all about our generator and how we use it all together so that we can run anything in our camper anytime we want to. So come along with us and I'll show you how we do it. So before we head right into the solar setup, I thought I'd bring out the whiteboard, because you can't have any solar video without a whiteboard, right? So let's jump up on the roof and check out the panels that I have set up, and I'll tell you more about those as well. So we have 4 Renogy 100-watt solar panels that I found on Amazon for about $125 a piece. I've been really happy with these Renogy 100-watt solar panels. There have been days where I've seen up to 25 amps where I'm getting at 12 volts, so that's quite a bit of power, and I'm really happy with what these guys have put off. So that's what we have up there on the top. When I purchased them with flat mount brackets, but then I've since replaced those with a custom bracket that I built that allows me to tip them up and down. So the way I have this wired up is I have these 4 solar panels wired in parallel, which means that each of the wires from each panel comes together at one point, and then 2 wires bring it down to the Tracer MPPT solar controller. Now this is my second controller. I had one from Renogy. It was a 30 amp controller. It was just a standard PWM, but it wasn't programmable. That means you can set the voltage on it to anywhere that you want, and we'll talk about that a little bit later when I get to the Geek Out section. And then we have the solar controller wired into the Energizer 4x6 volt golf cart batteries. Now these batteries you can get anywhere from $80 to $90 a piece, and with 4 of them you get approximately 400 plus amp hours of power. Now I still think these lead acid batteries are the way to go. The downside of them is that they're really heavy, but the upside is that they're quite a bit cheaper than like a lithium battery, which I know a lot of people are going lithium, and you can get a 100 amp hour lithium battery for about $1,000. So for a bank like this in lithium, you could get two 100 amp hour batteries and be about the same, because lithium allows you to drain them pretty much all the way down, whereas these lead acid ones, you should only drain them down about 50%. So you're only getting about 200 amp hours out of your battery bank. But I mean, for around $400, that's quite a big difference between 2,000. Now from the batteries, I hooked into a pure sine wave inverter, one that I found on Amazon as well. And this is my second inverter that I've used. I had a 2,000 watt non-pure sine wave inverter, and it worked pretty well, except when I would run things like the microwave, you'd hear this just weird sound that really made you think that you're breaking something. So I decided that I wanted to go pure sine wave because I run my computer in here quite often as well on battery power. So I wanted really just clean power. And this one that I found on Amazon, it was roughly $159. It was pretty cheap, had good reviews, and for me it's been working awesome since I put it in. Now the reason that I went with a 1500 watt inverter is because there's not many things in your camper that'll be more than 1500 watts. I know a lot of people out there are going for like a 3000 watt inverter, but most of the things in your camper are below 1500 watts. Like for instance, your microwave or a toaster or even a curling iron or anything. The maximum that a 115 volt appliance will pull is usually 1500 watts. If you take a look at like a 110 heater, the maximum setting is 1500 watts. And so we have found that 1500 is really the sweet spot, because you can run that curling iron, you can run the toaster, your coffee machine, even the microwave and everything on it. But you just have to make sure that you run it one at a time. So you can't run your curling iron and your toaster at one time. So I believe that 1500 watts is a great way to go. So I decided to go that way because I could power everything in our camper except for the AC. So that is where the generator comes in. Now the generator, that's probably the coolest part of the system, I think, because it gives you the most flexibility. I wanted the generator so that I could run the air conditioner wherever we were, that allowed it of course, and I wanted the generator so if there was ever a point where something broke down on our solar or whatever, we could plug in the generator, run it, and have power. Now the generator I chose is the Champion 3400 watt inverter generator, and what I love about it is that it is LP. It has LP option direct from the factory. So I have it hooked up on the front of our camper, have it piped in directly to the LP containers that are on the tongue, so at any point I can run that off the fuel that we already are using. For us, having gasoline with us was really not something that I was interested in. First, our van is a diesel, and so we don't buy gas. And plus, having those containers around, like in the back of the van or something where it could just stink up, just wasn't something that I was interested in. That's why I decided to go with LP. And to me, it's a really, really good option because it's always there and it's always ready to fire up whenever we need to. I have it mounted on the tongue of the camper with a stand that I made with some steel and my wire feed welder, but I know they sell this stand on Amazon, and I will put a link to it in the description. The only reason why I didn't use the stand from Amazon was simply because I didn't know if I wanted it on the tongue. So I knew that if I bought it and I didn't like it there, like maybe I was overweight or something, then I wouldn't be able to return it. So I thought I had some steel, I'll throw one together and see how I like it. And I love it. And I made a lock on it and everything so that no one will try to steal it. It's the best setup that I ever could imagine. So let's go outside, take a look, we'll fire it up, and I'll show you how it works. Now, of course, you'd think in my video I'd get it to start. Well, I'm gonna pull it, okay? And you can hear it running right now. It's kind of loud on this section of the camper because that's the way I set it up. I thought I would put the exhaust facing where we were, so if we had neighbors next to us, they wouldn't hear it. So this is what it sounds like on that side. So here's the back side. So if you were camping next to me, you'd be right here. And it's not that loud. You can probably hear me pretty good. The wind is probably keeping you from hearing me more than the generator is. But when I have this generator set up like this, it's all set. So all I have to do is take the power plug and plug it in. So let's head inside and try the air conditioner. And I got the GoPro hooked up outside so you can hear what the generator will do when we fire this up, okay? So for just a second, the air conditioner hits that, sound, and out there you can hear the Champion just rev up a little bit, but it's still on econ mode. So it's still quiet and it still runs, and you can run the generator for a long time. Now in the summertime, when those two 30-pound LP tanks are full, we can get quite a bit of hours out of that generator. I haven't even tested how long it will go. There was one point where I ran it for about 5 or 6 hours straight. I didn't even come close to getting to like a half a tank of LP. So I know that we could take it for quite a bit, especially if we were just running the air conditioner. Alright, so that's pretty much our setup in a nutshell. Now I'm going to create a blog post over on our website that'll have all of the stuff that we've used with links to where I bought it from and everything. Everything here except for the batteries I purchased on Amazon, and even the generator I purchased on Amazon. It was here 2 days later. You just can't beat it, right? So you'll see links for all of this stuff there. And so for the generator, it was simple. Put it on the tongue, pipe it into the LP, and you'll probably want to get someone like an LP specialist to do that for you if you haven't worked with that at all. But then once you have it set, you're pretty much good to go. You can just pull it, run it, plug your stuff in, you're good to go. So we won't get into that anymore here in this video, but now I want to go into, we'll call it geek out mode. There are things that I see people doing online that won't get them the best performance with their solar. This is probably the most important thing that I've learned while doing solar, is that the voltage going to your batteries is very important, okay? So in my example, I'm going to try to explain it like this. Let's say voltage is equal to tire pressure, okay? So we all have tires, we understand how tire pressure works. In your truck, you probably have tires that take 80 psi, and you know how much it takes because it's stamped right there on the side of the tire. The manufacturer says put 80 pounds in there and you'll have a full tire and you'll be able to handle the most load. Now something that I found out is that some battery manufacturers actually recommend the amount of voltage you should put into your batteries. So for instance, on the Trojan batteries, they say 14.8 volts is what you need to put into the battery to get it full. It is like a tire, and it says if you put less than 14.8 volts in it, it won't ever reach the maximum pressure, or it won't ever get to its maximum amount. Alright, so let's go with the tire example. If you hooked up your air compressor and that air compressor had a max of 60 psi and you put it on that tire, it would never get to 80 psi. It just wouldn't, because 60 psi would never fill up an 80 psi tire. You'd only get to 60, so you'd be driving around on tires that were not totally full. Same with a battery. Now when Trojans recommends 14.8 volts, if you only put your float voltage of 13.6 volts, which is normally what a camper would put out with their converter, if you only put 13.6 volts in, you're never fully charging that battery. You're only getting 80% of your battery because you're only putting that much pressure into your battery. Now the first charge controller that I had only put out 14.4 volts maximum. So when I was using that, even though there was full sun, it would only get my batteries to like 90% charged. Now some people out on the internet say it won't even do that. If you don't get the full amount of voltage into a battery, it will never be full. That's why I went with the solar charger that I have now, because it was programmable. So it's very important that you know what this is. And so from this point forward, when I replace my batteries, I'm going to make sure that I pick a battery that has manufacturer recommendations how many voltage I should put in. So I'm going to probably go with the Trojans next time. Since I didn't know this before, I just used my Energizer bank and that number has worked for it. Now you're going to want to check with your battery manufacturer. If you don't see any information out there and you just bought these batteries, I would recommend calling them and say, what is the standard voltage that I put in? So now that we know keeping this 14.8 voltage is important, we want to make sure that we can do this with the equipment that we have. Alright, so we're going to go even further into geek mode here. We're going to talk about voltage drop. Now, you're doing great, so just stick with me here, alright? The goal with our system, with my system, was to get the voltage to 14.8 volts at the battery. Okay, now it's going to depend on your battery manufacturer, like I mentioned, so make sure you figure out what your number is. All right, so with power, the higher the voltage, the easier it will pass through a wire. That's why when you're going down the road and you see those giant pylons that carry power really far, those wires in there have voltage up to like 100,000 volts. It's just way, way up there. That's what it takes to get the power from the power plant to many, many miles away to get power to wherever they want to. So in a solar setup, your panels create more than 14.8 volts. They can create up to 21 or 22 volts apiece. Now, since I have it wired in parallel, all of my panels come down and they're at about 20 or 21 volts. So it'll pass through the wire quite easy and get to the charge controller. Then from the charge controller, it takes it down to the proper amount of voltage to put into the batteries. So from the charge controller to the battery, it's going to put it out at 14.8 volts. So I want to make sure it gets to the battery at 14.8 volts. So what I want to do is make sure this charge controller is as close to the battery as possible so the line loss is the least. So it's okay if I have a longer run here and the voltage gets to the charge controller at 19 volts because that's still higher than the 14.8 that I need. So it's going to regulate that down and put it into the battery at whatever I program it. Now, my old setup, I had it going from the solar panels right down to the charge controller through a vent in the camper, simply because it was the easiest way to run the wires to get to the charge controller. Now, I had the charge controller set up right next to the panel on the floor in the camper, because I thought, hey, the 12 volts is already there, I can just wire it into the system and I'd be good to go. The only problem is that the charge controller was really far away from the batteries. So when it was putting out, let's say 14.4 volts, since it was my old one, by the time it got to the batteries, there was so much loss that only 13.8 volts were getting into the batteries. So my batteries were never getting fully charged. Even if the sun was out all day long, the highest pressure it would put into the batteries was 13.8 volts. That was simply no good. So when I'd be out, I'd run the batteries for a little bit, I'd run some fans or something, and then the batteries would die a lot faster than I thought they should. And I thought, this just isn't right. I did some research and found that number one, my charge controller wasn't putting out enough voltage, and number two, the line between it and the battery was way too long. By the time it got there, the pressure, the voltage, was way too low. So something that I've been seeing on YouTube a lot is that people would put the charge controller essentially wherever they think a good spot is, and they wouldn't run big enough wires, or the wire run between their charge controller to their battery was too long. Alright, so you're probably thinking, man, Nick, that's a lot of information. Can you sum that up for me? I say, sure. Alright, so the most important thing, make sure your charge controller is as close to the batteries as you possibly can get it. Another thing, make sure the wire between your charge controller and your batteries is big enough. I recommend going with like a 4-gauge wire. It's quite large and could be kind of hard to work with, but you know that the voltage drop between that and the battery will not be that much. If you have to have a long run, make it between your solar panels and the charge controller, because that voltage is going to be higher. Second thing is, make sure your charge controller is set to the right voltage, and you get that voltage by talking to the manufacturer of your batteries and asking them what is the voltage that you need to put in there to get them to the max level. Now, I really like the charge controller that I got. It was programmable. I was able to program it with the buttons on the charge controller, and it had a remote so that I can plug into that and run the remote into the camper, so I could change any of the settings that I want to in the camper and not have to worry about the length of wire between the charge controller and the battery. That's why they have those remote monitors. You don't want to put your charge controller where you can see it and have it be so far away from your battery. You want to monitor it with a separate monitor device. And I'll have a link for that as well inside the blog post so you can see all of that information. Alright, so since we're talking about power, I thought I'd list the positives and the negatives of the setup that we have. So we'll start with the positives. I believe this is the best of both worlds. When you have a solar and a generator, you can be anywhere and you have power anywhere. You can turn on your generator anytime. You never really run out of power unless you run out of sun and LP. where you can go out and get LP refills because you're doing it anyway, and the sun usually comes back after a few days. So I believe it's the best of both worlds. Biggest one, it's less money, right? So for this system that I have set up, I think I have a total of about $2,000, maybe a little bit more. The solar setup was about $1,000 for the batteries, the solar panels, and the charge controller. And the generator was about $1,000 by itself. Now I didn't buy them both at the same time. I bought the solar, had it hooked up for a couple years, and we were running it like that. And then at one point I said I want to have a generator. I purchased that, put it into the system, and said this is perfect. Now for the negatives, like for the generator, it's louder. It's louder than just having an inverter running. And really the only time that it would be louder is if I want to run the air conditioner. There was a point in time when we were at the solar eclipse and it got pretty hot and Lojo needed to take a nap, so we fired up the generator. Now a lot of people came to watch the eclipse where we were, so I felt a little bad because the generator was running, but it wasn't really that loud and nobody really came up to me and said, hey, turn your generator off please. So it's kind of a personal preference type of thing. I don't like to run it if there's a lot of quietness around, but a lot of times wherever we are and people are running generators, I'm not the only one. Another negative is that it's manual hookup. So the generator and the inverter are manual hookup. You have to take the plug it in before you're set up. So not a big deal, but a lot of these newer systems, the $5,000 or $6,000 systems, will have just an automatic switchover. When you're not on shore power, it automatically turns on the inverter. So that's a negative. Another negative, you can't always use your generator, like if they have specific times where you can't use it. And the last one is you can't use your AC on the solar inverter. The inverter that we have, the 1500 watt, is just not enough to run the AC. But really with the battery bank that we have, we wouldn't be able to run the AC probably more than an hour or so anyway. So we found that having a generator and running the AC for hours on end is really the best way to go. All right, so we've covered a lot of stuff here in this video, but I just have a couple final thoughts. The first one is everything that you see here is done by trial and error. Nobody has given us any equipment to review or has comped any part of our system, which is cool because I like to be able to share the things that I researched, and it's not necessarily that I saw it somewhere else on a video that I purchased it. So, I mean, if you look at our subscriber count below, we're not to the point where people are giving us stuff. So, and while you're looking at that button, go ahead and click the subscribe button, especially if you enjoyed what you saw, because I really enjoy sharing the experiences that we have and the things that we've purchased and had good luck with. So, I also just wanted to say I'm sorry because of my handwriting here. Nat came into the camper here while I was shooting this and was like, Dad, you should really change that up and do your best handwriting. But anyway, we have some things that are upcoming. So again, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click the subscribe button below so that you can see what's coming up. We have our camper tour coming up, and I've done the counting. It's more than like 50 some mods that we've done to this place to make it way more livable when we're on the road. Things like we've changed the whole layout of the camper so that we can have the smallest package but be super comfortable. So I'm super excited to share that. That one's coming up. Again, like with our bikes, how we do our bikes, how we have 6 bikes that we store inside the camper, which is pretty cool, and a lot more like stabilization and all that stuff. It's really fun for me to share this with you, and I hope you enjoyed what you saw, and if you did, be sure to click the subscribe button below so that you can see these videos as we bring them out. And we're also going to be doing season 2 coming up, where we're going to go out east, and we'd love to share our trip to DC with you as well. So we have a few more of season 1 that are still yet to come out, but we'd love to be able to share those with you as well. So thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions on this stuff, just leave a question below. I'll do my best to answer it. And then in the description as well is going to be a link to our blog post about this. I'm going to try to get the blog post out there with all the stuff that we use and pictures and all of that stuff. And if you have any questions, pop them below. And be sure to check out the website again, because I'll update that with some of the questions that I get from the YouTube questions below. So thanks again for watching. I hope to see you next time. Talk to you soon and have a good one.